Why being born as Kanye West sucks? Being born like Kanye West is awful begins long before you ever have a name that millions recognize. It begins with the fact that you are born with a nervous system that is not designed for an ordinary life. You are not just sensitive. You are overloaded. You are not just intelligent. You cannot stop thinking. There is no quiet inside you. There is only loud, and then louder. As a child, this looks strange. You are too emotional, too sharp, too confident about things other people hesitate over. You do not understand how others can simply sit, stay silent, be ordinary. To you, being ordinary feels like being erased, and very early you find a solution. If I stand out, if I push harder, if I am loud, I will not disappear. This is not a conscious decision. It is instinct. You quickly learn that attention works like a painkiller. When people look at you, the inside becomes tolerable. When people listen to you, the noise fades. When you are recognized, you finally feel the edges of your own existence. And here a connection is formed that will later destroy you. I exist as long as there is a reaction to me. In this structure, music is not a dream and not a calling. Music is a tool, a way to organize chaos, a way to pour pressure into form. You are not a romantic. You are an engineer of your own psyche. You assemble yourself piece by piece through sound, through rhythm, through control, and as long as you control the process, you survive. Early success only strengthens this. You are praised not for depth, but for boldness, not for restraint, but for aggression, not for maturity, but for force. You internalize a simple and extremely dangerous algorithm. The more radical my behavior, the stronger the reaction. And reaction is what keeps me functional. No one tells you to learn how to slow down. They tell you not to ease up, and you do not. With every year, the scale grows, and along with it grows your confidence that your internal impulse equals truth. You do not test your thoughts. You do not verify your ideas. You do not ask yourself, what if I am wrong? Because doubt to you feels like failure, and failure feels like a return to silence, which you have been running from your entire life. When real success arrives, you are already fully formed. You have a style, a reputation, an image, and most importantly, you have power. Not formal power, but psychological power. People adjust. People are afraid to contradict you. People begin filtering reality before delivering it to you. And at that moment, you find yourself inside a perfect storm because you are a person who critically needs feedback and at the same time a person who has been isolated from it. You begin living inside a bubble where every feeling you have is confirmed, where every irritation is explained by other people being stupid, where any resistance is perceived as hostility, and you sincerely do not understand why the world has suddenly turned against you. You do not see that the problem is not the world, but the fact that you stopped checking yourself against reality a long time ago. Every outburst brings short-term relief. This is important to understand. You do not destroy things because you want destruction. You destroy because you want relief. You speak out, and the pressure drops. You post, and it feels lighter. You explode, and you feel control again. But relief is always brief, and consequences are long, and with each time, the gap between them grows. People begin to leave, at first quietly, then permanently, not because they are weak, but because it is impossible to stay near you for long. You live at the peak, and the peak is not a place to live. It is a place for a sprint, and you have been stuck there forever. Before that moment arrives, there is a quieter phase that almost no one notices from the outside. From the outside, everything still looks successful. The numbers are still high. The name still carries weight. The audience is still there. But something internal has already started to rot. This is the phase where performance replaces connection. You no longer speak to be understood. You speak to maintain pressure. Every appearance becomes maintenance work. Every statement is not expression, but regulation. You are not sharing thoughts. You are bleeding pressure in public. Here is the paradox. The more famous you become, the less room you have to experiment safely. Early in life, mistakes are feedback. At this level, mistakes are headlines. So you stop exploring ideas slowly. You push them out raw. You don't refine thoughts anymore. You release them mid-process because holding them inside feels worse than the backlash outside. People assume this is arrogance. It's not. It's urgency. At this stage, your internal timeline breaks. Everything feels immediate. Every thought feels like it must be expressed now, or it will suffocate you. Waiting feels unbearable. Editing feels like censorship. Silence feels like punishment. So you start confusing impulse with honesty. If it came from inside, it must be true. If it feels strong, it must be said. This is where relationships start to fail in a very specific way. Not dramatically, mechanically. Conversations shorten. People stop challenging your thoughts and start managing your reactions. They don't tell you what they think. They tell you what won't trigger you. And slowly, without realizing it, you lose access to unfiltered reality. You are surrounded by people, but no one is actually with you. Here's another hook most people miss. You are still productive, still creating, still moving. But the creation has changed function. It's no longer discovery, it's defense. You create not to explore who you are, but to hold yourself together. Art becomes armor instead of language, and armor is heavy. At this point, your identity hardens. You stop being flexible. You stop being able to say, that idea was wrong, because your ideas are no longer separate from your sense of self. Criticism doesn't feel like disagreement. It feels like annihilation, so you fight it harder, louder, publicly. This is also where irony dies. You lose the ability to laugh at yourself, not because you lack humor, but because self-distance is dangerous. Distance creates silence, and silence creates collapse. So you stay intense, you stay absolute, you stay serious, all the time. The audience senses this shift. They feel the tension. They start watching differently, not as participants, but as observers. The relationship changes. It becomes asymmetric. You are still speaking to them, but they are no longer speaking back in the same way. And that imbalance feeds the instability even more. You are still moving forward, but there is no longer a sense of direction, only momentum. And that is the most dangerous state a person like this can be in. High speed, no steering, no brakes, just force. Then comes the moment when you are left alone with yourself. But you no longer know how to speak to yourself. Because your entire life you spoke through other people's reactions, through noise, through conflict, through attention, and without that, you do not understand who you are or why you are even continuing. The present moment is the most brutal one, because now you understand everything. You feel that people listen to you differently, not with interest, but with caution, not with respect, but with anticipation of a mistake. You know that any word you say can become the final argument against you, and that makes the pressure even stronger. But you only know one way to release it: to speak again. This is a closed loop with no elegant exit, because the exit requires something you were never taught: endurance, silence, being insignificant, being unheard. And for you, that feels identical to non-existence. And this is why being born like Kanye West is awful. Because you were never given a choice. You started life at the limit. You were switched on at maximum from the very beginning. And no one gave you instructions for living at a medium volume. You are not a bad person. You are not a villain. You are not a caricature. You are a person who was rewarded too early for something that should have been taught how to be controlled first. And now you pay for it every day. Not with money, not with reputation, but with the inability to simply exist, to live a day without the need to prove your own existence. And the most terrifying part is that you understand this too late. When your personality and your myth are already inseparable, when removing one destroys the other, when the question of who you could have been no longer has any practical meaning. You did not choose to be born this way, but now you are trapped in it forever, and that is exactly why it is awful.